justice for all.
Thank you. Next item is the approval of the June the 9th meeting minutes. Anyone on the board have any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, I'll
make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Only thing I want to tell you is, Wendy, that was a great job. Is she here tonight?
She is on vacation. We will pass it on.
Okay, thank you.
I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Item number 4, application 3179, an application for a special exception in the agricultural district. This is a quasi-judicial application, and we need to know if there's been any communication, ex parte communication concerning this item from any member of the board. Seeing no one with anything to report, turn the time over to Mr. Mingle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This request is located basically southeast of Espanola, and you'll see the parcel here. It's actually kind of the boundary line between the yellow and the blue. I've got some more detailed graphics as we proceed here with this. It's accessed from County Road 13, and so it's going to be in that, I don't think I can show you with my cursor, but it's in that south area, southeast of the intersection there, basically downtown Espanola. And so we've got the graphic here, and you can see that part of the conservation map that comes into a portion of the property where we made the comment about an administrative map amendment being necessary because of that conservation designation. They've trued up the designation to what matches with the wetlands, and you'll see that also here in a few moments. And so we've got this star here showing on that area where the proposed soil extraction operation will be located. This particular request, soil extraction in the AC district, is a special exception. It's to have a borrow pit in this area. And here's our flood zone map that shows the same location. And finally, your wetlands, and you can see those wetland areas that at least were preliminarily shown, on the National Wetlands Inventory before the site-specific review was done. And so you'll see that here in just a moment, where I'll get a little closer with some of those graphics. So the special exception soil extraction borrow pit use, we've had a few of these that have come in. Our conditions ordinarily are related to timing of the borrow pit, the duration, and also the daily operations on site through the submittal. The pit is accessed again from County Road 13. You also see some conditions we recommended related to repair of the road should any damage occur. We provide in the staff report the minimum distance of 200 feet from any nearest residential unit that's presently on site. Excavation activity lasts anticipated between 18 and 24 months. And then we have received that legal description for the wetland for the administrative future land use map amendment. And that particular future land use map amendment, we have a policy in our comprehensive plan that says that in order to true up those areas where conservation may not match wetlands, the applicant can submit that data to us, and we process those annually and then send a transmittal to the state at the end of the calendar year that says, here's the amendments that we have processed. And they basically acknowledge those back once those are received. So here's the graphic of the pit itself, and we have our kind of area there, again, on that boundary line between the two parcels. And that this particular graphic shows with that blue line, the project area, the upland buffer adjacent and outside of that project area, and then the surveyed wetland line being in the light green or the teal color. And so you have that boundary that's shown here. And then this is what we refer to as that area where we have the conservation flume that's there, the area we're going to take out. And so it's not a large area. It's 6.13 acres. It's going to be amended with the map, but that's to correct that area to true up where the wetland line actually lies as it relates to the proposed pit. And then this is the sheet that was within your packet that showed the detail on the pit itself and the extraction activity that's going to happen there and the extent of that as far as the depth of the pit. With that presentation, we're providing recommendation for you. Planning and Development Board finds that all the special exception criteria as listed in the guidelines at the Land Development Code Section 30703F have been met, and therefore approve the special exception for soil extraction or borrow pit located on the 2 parcels listed, subject to the following conditions. 1, special exception runs with the land. 2, the owner or contractor to obtain all permits prior to commencement of work. 3, the use shall be limited to 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday. The parcel shall remain under single ownership. 5, a minimum 50-foot wide perimeter buffer shall be maintained adjacent to the parcel boundary lines within which no activity shall take place. 6, applicant shall obtain an administrative future land use amendment to correct the conservation future land use designation prior to commencement of any activity on the site. We have now met that condition through the wetland description being provided to us. We'll process that on our own. 7, applicant to provide necessary access improvements consisting at a minimum of installation of a paved driveway connection to County Road 13 and paved shoulder apron edge opposite the driveway and along County Road 13 with other improvements as determined by the county development engineer at the time of the right-of-way permit application for the driveway permits within the public right-of-way to ensure safe traffic movement on and off County Road 13 with no damage to pavement and or drainage flow. And our final condition, 8, any damage to County Road 13 directly resulting from and in close proximity to this use shall be the responsibility of the owner-operator. We've watched these fairly closely. We've had them occur in the past. We've done kind of before and after photos and video and been able to link that to the operation and intend to do the same with this operation if it is approved. Haven't provided a alternative recommendation, and that would be on the opposite side, that you find that the criteria have not been met and therefore would deny the request. And so we do have that available for you also. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll submit my report for the record detailing the findings related to the special exception criteria. Wait any questions from the board. I believe we do have a representative of the applicant present from Matthews Design Group who can speak more directly on the proposal if you have any questions on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mingle. If the applicant's present and wishes to make a statement, please come forward and state your name for the record, please.
Good afternoon. Shannon Acevedo with Matthews Design Group for the record. And that was a great presentation. I don't really have anything to add, so I'll be available for any questions that you may have about the proposal.
Yes, Mr. Langella.
Hi, I don't know if you can answer this because you're the design side, but it said in that application that this was going to be like a year and a half, the proposed time. Are they taking the dirt and stockpiling it on site and selling it later? Are they taking the dirt and selling it as they extract it? So will all the operation end in a year and a half? Do you know?
That's an excellent question. And actually, I had asked the client about the time frame before coming here. He couldn't be here today. But he did say that 18 to 24 months would be the minimum, and it could potentially be up to 3 years. In terms of stockpiling, I'm not sure the timing or phasing of how that would happen. I know the borrow pit's planned as a single phase, and at this point in time, I don't know of any specific projects that would be used for, so I think it's going to be demand-based.
Mr. Mangle, does that coincide with the special exception requirements? I mean, I know that for the neighborhood, they'll be thinking there's trucks coming in and out of there, and hopefully those are the same hours that the borrow pit digging is going to happen. But the operation of a borrow pit can be either one operation, which is the digging and removing of all the dirt at one time, or the stockpiling it and the future sale. And how do we treat that? And is that part of this special exception?
The soil extraction is if you were digging and then using it on the site, we wouldn't even be considering this.
No, I mean, talking about trucking it off the site,
stockpiling
it. So for the next 10 years, there could be trucks coming in and out of there at all times of the day.
Trucking it off is to me is the true special exception, and so that's the thing that has the traffic generating use to it. And you'll notice in what I had to go back and check while your question was being answered that, and we've kind of learned from these that we don't maybe necessarily put in a direct duration, that knowing that the limits of the pit itself will act as the limiting factor, and so that we've had before where, and you'll probably recall them, where they've had to come in and ask for time extensions, and so what I'm mentioning here to you, I guess the way I'm getting around your question to get to the answer, stockpiling is not as critical in the context of the special exception. except that then the neighboring properties have the result of the fugitive dust, that if you got the wind that picks up, if it sits long enough, we'll have vegetation grow on it. We've had that happen in the recent past. If not, we get the complaints. We do address that effectively through code enforcement. And what we've had before is a requirement for watering the pile, and that watering is happening on a continuous basis when the conditions require that to happen. And then if the pile is going to remain and not be pulled from, then we ask that some kind of vegetative cover be provided, that they go through and they hydroseed it, and so that we keep down on that dust.
So if the borrow pit operations may continue long after the digging, the actual trucking of it, I'm not sure where on this drawing the actual road was leading out. I don't know if that's been identified anywhere. I don't know if I saw that.
I think you're seeing it along the east side, and so they're coming in at the bottom of the pit.
I see where it comes out of the borrow pit. Where does it hit? Where does it hit County Road 13?
As you see let me go back to this again. I wish I could point on this. At the corner of the yellow parcel, where see the roadways that are there.
Very top, the very
top, the yellow
that's
parcel.
the northern part of the property.
Yes, sir.
So they would be coming out close to where all the population is in Espanola.
Not the greatest density. That there's one adjacent.
But that's on this map. They're coming out the closest versus coming out to the. I guess it would be the. I don't know if that. No, that's west.
Southeast. Be the southeast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the road access has been thought out as far as what's the best way for it to be least obstructive to these people. If this operation is going to continue on for 5 years or whatever, 10 years, and we're going to have all this material coming in and out of there. That was my only concern I had about this was, about how this operation may not be dig it all up, truck it up, and be out of there. They very well may do what the applicant is saying, that they may stockpile it and then sell it as time goes on. And how is that going to be addressed?
I think what we've seen before is that, and we'd hope otherwise, that maybe some of that trucking operation would head west, but most of it's going to be heading east. We know that, and so that and I'm probably not going to like what I'm going to say, but the traffic that's coming through from Espanola is making that same direction. That the density is further to the west, and they're all making that same movement, so that there's not. I think I know what you're getting at as far as driveway access.
I'm thinking driveway. I'm thinking about noise.
Yes.
That if they're pulling out, because I looked at that. I'm saying, but they're driving pretty far up north to turn around. It's west. I keep saying north, but it would be west on the property, and then be turning around and going all the way back east to get out to where most of the development would be done, and that's where most of the people live in Espanola. And it just would make more sense if the driveway was closer to 13 and not interfere with them more. But I don't know. That was just a suggestion on my side. I just didn't know if this is going to continue on, and if it did, if that's going to be a concern, and if you guys had looked at that.
We did look at it. We talked about using kind of the existing driveway cuts, and that this was more desirable than any other option. I think I know where you're heading, but we can look closer if it's something that the board would like to add as a condition. It would be potentially another driveway cut. Remembering also that it's maybe not as easy as it seems, that there is a parcel in between County Road 13. It was the old former railroad bed, and what I remember there is that there's some changes in elevation because of that. So it may require
Phil?
Yeah, we got plenty of sources. Good point. But we can certainly talk about that if the board desires for some condition adjustment there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Mr. Goodman, your microphone.
Another one. What are they going to do with the pit after they finish mining?
There is a plan that was part of the original site plan, and I can share that for public record if you like. But
Yeah.
essentially, the sides will be sodded, the rim ditch filled, and then it will be turned into a pond.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Was there any way to avoid the land use amendment?
Not sure I'm following. Yeah, it could have avoided the conservation area. That was one of our initial comments, is this conservation area is out there. The borrow pit area needs to be shifted away from the conservation area, and the response from the applicant was that that conservation area really didn't match up to the wetlands, and our policy then comes into play that it's to true up those areas. And so the initial response from staff was, this can't be here. You've got to avoid that conservation area, and then prompted their reply back to us saying, our map's wrong.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? If not, we'll open it to the public at this time. Thank you. Any member of the public wishing to come forward and make a comment on this item, please step forward and to the podium, state your name for the record.
How you doing? My name's Edward Smith. I live on Falcon Fire. I got a letter saying that this pit is going to be 300 feet from my house. Really, my neighbor has children. They couldn't make it, but I can't see the land getting dug up and have to deal with all that noise in the trucks, having a huge pit dug and taking away homes for all the wildlife. I could see a house going in, that's fine, because, you know, there's still going to be woods, but with a pond, the mosquitoes, and I just, you know, and I don't really want to deal with the noise.
You live just north of this?
I live on 35 Falcon Fire, right off 13, across from the park that's there. They're saying 300 feet. 300 feet's not very far away from a house.
It appears as if the northwest portion of the parcel that's not impacted by the borrow pit would be where his 300 feet would come in.
Because
So on your graphic you have displayed before you where County Road 205 goes out to State Road 100.
Oh, okay.
He's on the north side of 205. That's where Falcon Fire subdivision is. And it's the northwest quadrant of the total acreage that it would be nearest.
we did the notice along the boundary of the yellow and the blue parcels, even though the borrow pit itself is in the center of where the boundary line is between the two of them. The pit is further than 300 feet away from the gentleman's property.
Our pit straddles that blue line, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The one that, the east blue line.
Right.
It would be the common, it would be the, if there was a yellow that you could see, there would be the west yellow line, the east blue line.
Could we put the photograph back up that shows the actual pit with the
Yes, sir.
different colored barriers?
Other concern I have is I'm on well water. Is this going to cause any problems with my well when they dig a hole? If they hit my vein in my well, I mean, you don't know where the veins go and my water gets contaminated. Or if stagnant water builds up in the pit and it goes into my well water. I don't have any water filtration or anything. Concern I have too. Or they tap into my vein, my well goes dry. Veins move, you know, you can't really predict where the veins are in the ground unless, you know, something like this happens and then you go, no water. That's another concern I have.
Okay.
That's all I really have to say.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Any other member of the public wishing to come forward? If not, we'll close public comments and open it to the board.
My issue is, you know, based on his comment as well, though, but there's not a lot of trees in between the north, or I keep saying the north, but the west side of that and all those homes. And it would just be, I just think would be more conducive if the road didn't come all the way back up, all those trucks for the next 5 years and keep hanging into, you know, that very corner of the property. They would come out the other way. I don't know if the applicant knows if that's feasible or not, but that's just my feeling. I just think it would be more conducive. I think a 20-foot depth was where we were at with that well. I mean, with that thing, I don't know if that would bother the water table. I don't know if you have any information on that, Adam, but
Yeah, I don't have any specific information on that, but I know that we haven't had those, in this area, we haven't had those problems before. And let me point out a couple of other, well, I think I still got it on here. You can see right underneath our Flagler vicinity map, there's the other more recent borrow pit that we have off on the right-hand side of your drawing. Again, just to point it out, not to say that this area of the county we're growing borrow pits, but we have one there and haven't had any, to my knowledge, any effect on the wells in the area. This is an area I think that's designated as, I believe I got it right, high aquifer recharge in this area, and it's also fairly high elevation wise that we've got some good. I don't think we're going to have an issue with the groundwater.
Chairman, do you think, could the applicant answer the question of whether or not it's feasible to put the road further to the east?
Please come forward and state your name again. Thank you.
Shannon Acevedo again for the record. In terms of the roadway placement, the idea was for the applicant to use the existing dirt drive. It's hard to see, but where it sort of V's off and intersects where the blue line starts on the eastern boundary, those are the dirt drives that are shown on the site plan. Now, where that dirt drive kind of starts moving towards the west, that's where the entrance to the borrow pit project would be. But there is about just a little over a half mile of distance between the county road and where that dirt drive starts to veer over to the west. So the idea was to have the least amount of impact as possible and use that existing stabilized surface and then do a 20-foot gravel stabilized surface around, just directly adjacent to the pond to be able to get to the soil. Do you have a specific alignment in mind that you were hoping for?
If you look on the map he has on the screen, you see the other borrow pit he showed to the right, and you see how the road comes out and is, where he has the red pointer right now, I don't know who's doing that. Are you doing that?
I don't know how I made that work, but let's cross our fingers. I'm not going to touch anything right now.
But that's
so.
the approximate location that they're proposing.
That's right.
Right, and that's close to all the population base up there. If you were to slide that down towards the other borrow pit exit.
I'm going to try to do that, but I don't
not,
think it's going to work.
Not all the way down there because their property, there's a wedge there that they don't own. But it looks like there's almost along that tree line, they could almost come right out and.
That's right where I'm at, yes, sir. I can't get it to work, but.
And that would at least alleviate, it would make their road a lot smaller, a lot less trucking on both sides, but they're not, those trucks that would be coming out of there for the next several years aren't going to be up there towards where all the population base is. You know, they would have a further distance for the noises of the truck and perhaps even the loading of it if it's down closer there than all the way up towards the top. Is that feasible to put it there?
Well, I wouldn't be able to answer that without my client being here. Is there an existing entrance anywhere around that general vicinity that you were thinking, or would this be a new?
You're asking me?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know the property. I mean, I'm looking at the map. I did not drive out there and try to do it.
Right, but in terms of an alternate location, was there
No,
a
I'm
specific?
just looking at where he had his pointer.
Yeah.
Looked to be the least disruptive to the neighborhood, and then it would be less gas or diesel fuel for all your trucks, or your clients' trucks, but it also would be least disruptive to the neighborhood up there in Espanola where there's, a concentration of people. Instead of driving the trucks all the way up there, turn around and come back down, starting at 7 in the morning, ending at 6 at night, 6 days a week, for the next 5 years or 10 years or whatever it takes to get rid of the dirt. That's where, in that spot right there, what I was thinking.
What I want to pull up the wetlands map so that if we follow that tree line, we got a wetland that's there potentially to deal with. And I wanted to see if there was any other wetlands in there because I think that's all pasture. It may be planted pine now. It's hard to say off of this aerial. But where I am at with this pointer now, this is across from the, I think it's called Flagler CDS. which was operation. I think they're still operating some, but just not as busy as they were. But it's construction demolition debris there on County Road 13, and so that was a similar special exception that we're going to have. I don't know if that would necessarily be a conflict point because we had them through a similar process with improvements that we were watching at that point of intersection as well. And so if they aligned with that, that may be a possibility.
And I apologize. I don't think that's something I can condition without my client's consent. What I would add is that the reason for choosing the location that we did is because there is an existing opening there that, like I said, would be the least amount of obstruction to what's currently available in terms of access.
I know that would be the least expense and easiest for your client. I'm just wondering, as a compromise to help the neighborhood there, if that would be a spot that would work out for you. It seems like it would just bring a lot more, if we take the activity away from the more densely populated area to an area that's more sparsely populated.
Now, I can share with you, I did a little bit of research before today on distances to homes, and as the staff report mentioned, we would be no closer than 200 feet from the nearest residence. Looking at the other homes that are close by to where the activity is going to be, I identified one other home that was 873 feet away, and then a third home that was 904 feet away. Those were the closest ones that I had seen, in addition to that one at 200 feet. So I think it's also important to take into consideration scale of, it's one thing to see it on a map, but the true distance of where these activities are going to take place in relation to the surrounding development.
I know what you're saying. Again, if you look how close that is to that neighborhood where the road comes out, I think the digging of it is one area, is one thing, and that will have a finite period. I just think the trucking would be the other side. I'm in the construction business, so I know how loud heavy equipment is, especially over areas that don't have any trees, and there's a big, vast area with no trees there. So that's my feeling anyway. I won't occupy the whole time. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other board comments?
Well, Adam, what would be the procedure if we did want to ask the applicant to consider the other access?
We could, and I'm not sure if any representative from her client can be contacted at this point. If we even kind of laid on the table this item and then picked it back up later in the meeting, if that was possible. I don't think that may be possible at this point. Could continue the request to the next meeting. Could approve it and with this condition in place, and then and maybe with I'm heading out on a weird tangent here, but with the caveat that if that one condition doesn't work, that the applicant can come back then at the next meeting. Effectively, we're going to approve it like this with this access in this place, but not have it where effectively it doesn't have to go through a regular appeal. That all the other conditions remain in place, but number 9 will be access as set by the board, and if there's some difficulty with that, then they'll come back. If not, and they're going to run with that and figure it out, then it's set and the action's done. And so that if we did that other scenario, we'd still have to likely do some kind of notice, because we don't want to have it hanging out there where, okay, it's done. We all think it's complete. We've got 9 conditions. It's approved in this point. And so then I'm trying to think of a way that it's an appeal without the, I think I've got somebody telling me no, but anyway.
I think you're looking at a continuance, or you're looking at an approval with a condition, or you're looking, at a denial. I mean, it may be that a continuance is in the best interest of the applicant, so that the applicant can have an opportunity to explore it and then come back to tell you why it doesn't work, or or Adam will come back and tell you that it should, there's no reason why it can't work. Would hate to see you approve something.
I agree. I think a continuance would probably be better for everybody involved. We need a motion on that?
I make a motion, we continue it to date certain to the next planning board meeting.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the continuance, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Gina, do you have a calendar handy? Do you know what date that is?
Going there, yes, sir. Be September 17th at 6 PM.
10th?
No, yes, you're right, September 10th, excuse me.
September 10th at 6 p.m.
September 10th.
in
That
this
is the
room.
second Tuesday.
And so that anyone interested in attending September 10th, 6 p.m. in this room.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is item number 5, application 3189. It's an application for variances in the C2 General Commercial and Shopping Center and R1, the Rural Residential District. This also is a quasi-judicial item requiring any reporting of ex parte communications. Does any member of the board have anything to report at this time? Seeing none, we'll turn the time over to Mr. Mingle.
Mr. Chairman, just to disclose, I think folks had sent us emails, and just to the extent that those emails were included in your packets, we'll just kind of let that sit. But if anyone has any additional disclosures to make, because we did have the applicant reach out to some of the planning board members, we did include those in the packet where we had that contact that we were aware of.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was just wrapping this up, so I didn't get a chance to respond so quick. I did have, I got an email without knowing what it was, actually, because in my business, that's exactly the type of stuff that I deal with. I did reach out to the applicant, and as soon as he started explaining what he wanted, I told him that it wasn't appropriate for me to hear the discussion. I did not go into any details with him. I just said I really thought he should just bring it up and with sunshine in front of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And I actually did respond back to indicating that I would not be able to meet with the applicant, nor had I reviewed any of the attachments or anything within the email. And I copied the county on that.
I can echo those experiences and reaction. I didn't know that was a disclosure item since I responded by saying I wasn't going to respond.
I also responded the same way.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mingle.
This request is the former Newcastle Twergy boat building parcel, and you have the future land use displayed on the graphic in front of you. It's got the commercial high-intensity designation, and then the zoning there, C2, on the parts that are shown in red there. And then the flood zone, as we had presented before, on this parcel, and then also the wetlands map. And so we had all those, I think we had those last displayed for you when we had the gentleman, Dr. Dredge, come in for his contractor storage special exception. So these are before the fact variance requests. The two requests you have before you tonight: height variance, increase the maximum height from 40 feet to 58 feet, an 18-foot variance, and then a setback variance for the rear setback, reducing it from 50 feet to 35 feet, 15-foot variance. That height variance is for proposed new boat storage building, rear setback variance for a new restaurant building. Part of the applicant's justification for the variances was the county's setbacks that were listed in the February 21st, 2000 Board of County Commissioners approval of the Newcastle future land use amendment and rezoning. And wanted to speak about that fairly quickly, that we had the C2 zoning put in place. We had the determination by the board in 2000 that this Newcastle Marine, the previous Twergy boat manufacturing, was a continuing, effectively made the operation a conforming use through the board action in 2000, and said that so long as this remained in place, it was allowed to continue with the C2 zoning. There was at a point when Newcastle went to Putnam County, a request for a determination of a use through the planning director's powers, and that request was, could a boat storage building, boat storage operation be placed within the confines of the parcel? And my determination was it could. And as a marine-related use, less intense than boat manufacturing that had been previously approved by the Board of County Commissioners. There's some discussion now about that, and I advise the board, as I had in my staff report, that your determination here is not to determine the use. Your determination is related to the two variances on the table for you, except to the extent that you have to consider the use to consider the variances. So in the circular reasoning that I'm presenting to you, the restaurant, you're going to hear from the applicant, I can only put this restaurant here because it's supposed to be here because it's a waterfront restaurant. And if I'm 50 feet back, what's the point in me putting a waterfront restaurant when I'm 50 feet back? Boat storage, I've got some kind of special reason why I have to have the 58 feet in order to have my boat storage that makes that unique, and that's something that's particular about this. And that's the case that he has to present for that it's related to that particular use of why that is needed to have that extra height. If it's not demonstrated, then the use is not part of your consideration of those variances. As I've advised the folks that are questioning the determination, that may be appealed. That may be yet pending before you. Again, that's not for your consideration. The site plan, depending on the action on the variances, will go through a technical review committee approval. It's already been through part of that, and it's awaiting then your decision on the variances on whether or not that site plan gets further towards its approval. And these variances, of course, may also be appealed. This is the piece, the excerpt, may have included this in your packet, can't remember, but this is the future land use excerpt that showed the extent, I think, email item that I presented to you from the Jordans had mentioned that, well, it didn't look like it had happened like it had. And so the extent of the land use is shown here, and that was the extent of both the C2 and the mixed-use low. And I believe the property appraiser currently has it displayed differently. We're having that with quite a few of our land uses right now. We're working with the property appraiser to try to work that out. The example I keep giving to folks is if you look on Hammock Dunes, it now has no land use, I think, as of today. And so it does have a future land use designation, but it's just not showing up on the map. So we're trying to work through technical issues with that. But this was the action, this was the graphic that was transmitted to the state that showed the extent. And that jagged edge is the northernmost lot out of those three lots that are here part of this, 41, 42, and 43. 41 then being very specific through its exclusion of a buffer 40 feet wide, some 200 feet back away from A1A that was to be left as residential and to be a buffer area. This was that plan for Newcastle when they came in, and so just to share that history of the intensity that had been on the parcel before, what we basically have now, that existing building. Landscaping that was shown at the time and part of the justification for the 35-foot buffer on the north and south, and then the proposal that was presently on the table that's prompted the variance requests. We've reviewed the variance criteria and the items that we've had, and I've provided my response to these. That there's a first criteria being particular nature of the property. Is it unique in its character? And I've come back and said I don't believe it's particularly unique, except in the fact that it's previously used as boat manufacturing, and so it's got that characteristic along with the C2 zoning. Didn't have any particular reservation to that, but it may be a little hard to see where there are particular conditions that justify the issuance of a variance, at least a height variance, or the rear setback variance related to that uniqueness of the parcel. The biggest difficulty for us is criteria 2 that says this is not of the owner's doing. And so with this one being a before the fact variance, it's pretty clear the intent here is to do something that isn't permitted within the C2. The dimensional requirements within C2 are those that we are trying to meet. That's the particular portion of the parcel that's got the zoning on that we're looking to satisfy the 50-foot rear setback, the 40-foot height limitation. And so with that in mind, the remaining two criteria I didn't have an issue with. Those are the ones that say that you're not being detrimental to adjacent properties. It's hard to argue something different when the Board of County Commissioners had approved a more intense use previously with some buffers that they put in place to attempt to buffer that intensity of the use, and the final one being that it's not a use variance in and of itself, that this is a permitted use seemingly within the C2 zoning district through the board action in 2000. I think the final point, the criteria that we don't measure, is that one that says, is this the least amount of relief necessary to alleviate any hardship? And the applicant wasn't specific on that. Maybe they can speak more directly on why 18 feet for the height is the minimum amount of variance necessary for the height, or the 15 feet on the rear, and why not some lesser number for both of those. And so I've hopefully left both an opportunity for the applicant to discuss that further, and also for you then to question that more with that not being answered specifically. And so we see those more, and I think we have more justification when those are after the fact variances, but in the before the fact variance, and it just wasn't addressed by the applicant. So I'd want you to also have some response from the applicant on that. With that, our recommendation, as we included within your packet, was for denial principally on the basis that this is a owner-created hardship, and there wasn't justification that I felt was provided within the record for the granting of the variances, and recommending a denial for both the height and the rear setback. And then alternatively, then you could find that those criteria have been met in their entirety, and find otherwise. I know the applicant's present and is prepared to make a presentation to you. They have provided the handout, I believe, with potentially a scenario, two scenarios of use. And just mention for the record, I don't think I've seen it before, but maybe I'll let them talk more directly about that, and then also about any review that they've had by A1A Scenic Pride of both of these options. I know that folks are present, particularly from A1A, who can talk then about these options if these have been considered. And for the benefit of the audience, one is showing a 58-foot, I believe that's height, boat storage at 41,850 square feet with building coverage at 29%. The other one shown is a 40-foot high boat storage at 57,510 square feet with total site building coverage of 33%. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll close my presentation, submit my report for the record, and await any questions from the board. Again, the applicants present for their presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Mingle. If the applicant's present and wishes to make a statement, please come forward and state your name for the record.
Bob Million for the applicant, Hammock Harbor. I have a handout that I'd like to, can I put this on a camera, Gina? Does this overhead work? Or I'd like the audience to see it, if possible.
We'll look to our support upstairs if they'll be able to provide. I think he's already heard us. He's catching up.
The variances are not required to put the intended use on the property. The variances are to make it a smaller footprint, to make it more attractive.
I'm sorry,
And to make less of an impact on the neighborhood and scenic A1A. So one of the exhibits that I've created for you is this one, which basically shows that a 40-foot setback from A1A is required, and a 40-foot building height is the limit by code. What we're proposing is to make the building physically smaller in footprint, take it 58 feet in height, and use the footprint that we saved to make architectural enhancements on the front of the building to make the building more attractive. So what I'm saying is if the variance is rejected, the use has been approved, the physical building at a lower scale meets the code requirements, but it's a worse condition than approving the variance. So what we're trying to do is make it more attractive, set it back farther from, here we go. Set it farther back from A1A. So, top example, this depicts the little blue dot's a car on A1A. Tree is about a 40-foot tree. This shows a 40-foot high building, 40 feet from A1A, applicable for boat storage. Second one shows a larger building, actually 160 feet back from A1A, or a smaller building 120 feet back, and scale up in size so that visually it masks the size of the building. So either way, it accomplishes what we want. We would prefer the plan that is the 58-foot height. The other plan one on the bottom shows a 40-foot storage building.
Mr. Millian, can you try the wireless microphone that's right there in front of you? You can.
Sure. Okay.
Or-
The one at the bottom shows a 40-foot storage building positioned 40 feet off A1A. It's a 57,000 square foot building. It meets all of the setback requirements. It meets the impervious. It meets everything that the code requires. You'll see it's color coded. The blue portion of it is the boat storage building. The red portion is the restaurant. The green portion is basically the restrooms and the service area for the boat storage. The top drawing depicts a smaller, taller boat building, but it also, and the restaurant is the same size, the restrooms and the boat storage equipment are the same size.
Want to move that page so we can see the bottom one, or the top one?
There we go.
There you go.
All right. And it also includes approximately 9,000 square feet of commercial. And the 9,000 square feet of commercial is adjoining the building, the large building, which basically masks it. So I go back to my first rendition, the portion here.
Yeah, flip it over.
Upside down. There you go.
Portion here is retail. That's part of the 9,000 square feet. And so instead of having a 40-foot vertical building, you've got something in the mid-30s that goes partially up the building and masks the building. It's also much, much farther back from A1A. Now, with the restaurant, go back to my site plan, the restaurant is the same physical size either direction. As the dry storage building gets physically larger, the parking changes. The restaurant is really the driver of the parking. The restaurant is the driver of a lot of this. This site does not have sewer, so we're on septic. So we've got to account for about 6,000 gallons a day of septic flow. This is not sure, but I'm just giving you an example of the things we've gone through. We had to preserve more than 50% of the trees. So there have been requirements. As I remember, something like 63,000 square feet of the site is restricted by buffers from the previous zoning. So you lose a third of it for the buffers. You lose some for other reasons. So basically, if we go with the plan that does not require approval, the restaurant is 50 feet from the intercoastal. It's a little bit closer to the property owners on the north, which I don't really like. By the variance, we can move the building closer to the center of the property. So that's really what I wanted to explain. It's somewhat difficult to see all of this stuff without a picture. We've been doing this for a year. We've done a number of site plans. This, I believe, is by far the best one that we've come up with. It's the least intrusive, and neither plan go up to the maximum allowed square footage of the code. So they're both below what could be there.
Mr. Millian, can you, so just benefit one more time, the top one that you're showing now is with variances, and then
Correct.
slide it up and slide up your graphic, and then just so everybody can see the one that without the variances. Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what the height of the current building that's there is?
59.6,
Thank you.
22,000 square feet roughly, and 59.6.
Is there any rendering that we have in our package that I might have overlooked that shows adjacent homes and what the impact would be on their view sheds?
I have no rendering. I know one of the adjacent homeowners is here, so he could speak to that. I do have one rendering that I'd like to show that I meant to put up earlier. This is, and one of the reasons I'm here before I have complete architectural renderings to show is that it's tens of thousands of dollars to design the building. I'd like to do it once. This is, in my mind, a fairly poor example of what I want to accomplish. This is a dry boat storage building. The wall height is close to, actually the wall height that we're proposing is 54 feet. So the roof, the peak of the roof, we want to peak so that it looks good. So it's not a 60-foot tall building. It's a 50, it's either 52 or 54 feet, I don't remember, wall height. The peak of it is 58 feet. This one is a flat roof. It's 55 feet in height, but you see the retail space that masks the front of the building, which makes it look not so high. That's what we're trying to accomplish, both on the front of the building and on the side of the building by installing the commercial areas.
Ms. Cornell, and answer your question, the graphic that's showing now with the restaurant positioned in the middle of the parcel, we were discussing as being preferable. I mean, that's not the right way to say it, but with the nearest home, and I'm looking at a graphic from my presentation. If you look at the wetlands inventory map, that may be a little hard to see on your packet or the aerial, you can see the home to the north, just right outside of the blue line, and so that's the one in the scenario without the variances, with the restaurant building being moved to the north, their view shed is significantly impacted.
Move to the north, it would be 40 feet from that homeowner. Under our proposal, it would be about 150 feet from the homeowner.
And then to the south, your home to the south is just about the same distance from the intercoastal at the back end of Hammock Hardware, as I'm recalling. I think you can see that also on the first page of the staff report. It's maybe a little hard to see it there, but there's a structure that's there that I believe is the home that's on that Hammock Hardware parcel that's at the rear. And so that would be the one that would be impacted by the rearward extent of the boat storage.
The boat storage would not get to, we're not asking for a variance for the boat storage under any conditions on the setback. It is probably 125 feet from the back of the property. So the restaurant is what encroaches, not the boat storage.
Right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
there's nothing, this diagram that's up now on the monitor, there's nothing that would stop you from building that footprint at 40 feet, is there?
Yes.
What?
Commercial requires different parking than the boat storage. And we're required to have on-site stormwater detention, and we're also required to have on-site parking. The plan that we're proposing has 131 parking places. The one that is shown on the bottom only has 104, and so we can't park the commercial. It's not, we can't meet code.
No, I'm talking about building a 40-foot tall building on the smaller footprint.
It wouldn't make economic sense. We need about 240 boats,
How many boats do you stack in a 40-foot building?
3 high.
3 high. So you're talking about adding a fourth layer with a
That's correct.
58-foot, or are you going to add 2 layers?
No, sir, a 4th layer.
1 layer.
Correct. And so
Calculate, have you calculated what that would be? How many boats are stacked on that 4th layer on this footprint here? The smaller footprint?
yeah,
In other words, if you went 58 feet, you
it
did
would
this.
be 60 boats. It would be the same amount, it's 60 boats that are on the top layer.
Okay,
And
so
it's the same,
you lose 60 dry slips by building this footprint at 40 feet,
that's correct, sir.
and that makes it non-economically feasible.
That's correct.
Have you done any permitting with the Water Management District?
For this site,
Yes.
no, there's none required for this.
Contacted them?
Yes. This is not
Have you
required.
submitted preliminaries to them?
No, sir.
Okay. So you don't know then whether or not this retention that you've got drawn on here would be sufficient?
Yes, I do. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the retention has been calculated, and there was an exhibit given to the technical review guys. And you're allowed to encroach 10% or, you're allowed to encroach a certain amount into the landscape buffer. The rest of it goes under the parking in vaults.
Okay, so you're pretty confident that your engineer is going to be able to permit this with the Water Management District with this amount of retention?
Absolutely, yes,
Okay.
sir. I was referring, I'm sorry, I thought you meant with boat docks, or that we don't need the permit for the docks because this already has the launch area from the previous use, and this is all self-contained. So there's not a core permit required for this application.
No, I get that. I'm talking about if you do the new improvements.
Yes, sir, it would go in vaults under the lot, under the parking lot.
And a question for staff on that point. Adam, is it historically allowed to use the landscape buffer in the overlay district for retention?
There is a limitation that's written into the district, not more than 10% may be used. And I don't have the exact quote here. I'm sure someone in the audience will have it, but it's, there's a limitation on how much you can use.
So you landscape around it with trees and like an OPEC screen like Publix did?
I think that's the intent, that it's not to be a spot where you don't have any buffer. It's just that there is an allowed encroachment.
It would be a dry retention, a dry detention in
Yes.
the buffer, not a wet.
That's
So there's
part of
no
the consideration.
There's no fencing around it. It's simply a bowl. It's a scooped out area, and whatever doesn't.
Yeah, I'm familiar with what they look like. Sometimes they're not a hole, sometimes they're concrete. I got one. That's all I have.
Anyone else? Yes, sir, Mr. Langill.
First question is to Adam. Adam, a project this size, whether he gets an approval tonight or not, he would still have to come back for a site plan approval to our board or just to you?
Just to a technical review committee.
Just TRC?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I didn't know if there was over 5,000 square feet or some trigger. I forgot what the trigger was for this.
Threshold, I think it was acreage, 5 acres. So that's
5 acres.
That's your
Okay.
limit. Yes, sir.
All right. So for the applicant, hi. Your client was here before, and we already gave him we did something on this 6 months ago or so. Do you remember what the use he intended for that building was at the time that he got the?
A dredge contractor and dock builder.
Right, and they were going to use storage. I guess that fell through or something, or is that still there?
Yes, no, it fell through.
Okay. I have a couple of questions for you. They talked about the material not being a metal building. How are you going to address?
Concrete.
You're going to make a concrete block building?
The building that I showed.
A tilt wall,
Not
is
a
that what
block,
that
it's
is?
It's a tilt wall.
Okay. And I guess the storage slips, I was going to ask you how many storage slips. I'm kind of a guy who, if anyone's watched me before, I try to look at these very creatively, but I think Adam's point is well taken. I think that your presentation made sense when you show, hey, look, this is what the code allows you, but the variance would give you something perhaps less obstructive.
I think it would give the
Right.
community something better.
But the vehicle for that would mean we have to meet the criteria.
Correct.
And I think I'm always able to look at a lot, and I think there's one of the characteristics of this one has to be, to me, that weird zoning that crosses over in the middle of that lot. And I think, but anyway, but let's just forget number one. Can you explain on number two how, if I wanted to say yes to this, how can I say yes to the fact that you're not creating this? This is not of your creation. Do you understand what that?
No, I do, and I guess there's a number of ways to look at that. I mean, what we believe the reality is that we don't need the variance for the use, but it would be detrimental. It would be a shame to
No, I get that, and I think, not everybody would agree with you, but I agree with you. I think that the 40-foot building going all the way up to 40 feet from the front would look horrible, would be a big eyesore to the neighborhood. And I think that keeping it back is going to be better. We're talking about the height now.
No, I understand.
I'll worry about the other thing in a second. But the vehicle to allow that to happen says you have to meet these criteria. Not that, hey, this is a great plan, let's take the rules and throw it out. So can you just give me the justification how that isn't something you would be creating, that somebody somehow forced this on you, or this was something that you couldn't help? Because you could build, as was already stated, you could build a smaller building. You just say it's economically not feasible, but you could build a smaller building.
Well, actually, we could not build, for this application, we could not build a
But you
smaller
could,
building.
but there's other uses you could probably
Well,
find.
yes and no. You're limited, because this site doesn't have septic, you're very limited in what you can put in. Like for a restaurant, for example, if you wanted a restaurant that served liquor, a 150-seat restaurant, I'm not sure you can put a septic system in here big enough to handle it. We're limited by so many things on this site. You're limited by the number of buffers, both imposed by scenic A1A and by the commission on some of the prior uses. You're limited by the fact that you do not have a sewer system. So those kind of limit our choices. A normal application, an office building or heavy commercial or an application like that, I don't think we could flush the toilets. I don't think that you could get the sewage treatment in a septic system on the site.
There are other commercial properties developed in Hammock and other places in the county without septic. They're with septic and well, right?
It's city water, but septic. And
Well, we have well and septic
Yeah.
properties with that.
We're figuring 6,000 gallons a day that we have to treat. And that was because the boat storage doesn't really use a lot, and the restaurant was limited in size, so that we were working around the requirements of the site.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Yes, sir.
How close is the current building to the road? How close is the current building to the road?
Current building has a couple of different elevations. The tall current building is around 120 feet. There is a building that's 35 feet. There's an office building in front. There's a warehouse that was built on the north side, and then the large boat building. The office in front is a 35-foot setback roughly. The large building is about 120. And so what we were doing was taking the large building back to 160 and putting the smaller building in front of it.
No, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir. We'll open this to the public at this time. Any member of the public wishing to address the board concerning this application, please come forward and state your name.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Dennis Bayer, 109 South 6th Street, Flagler Beach. I represent the Hammock Civic Association concerning some issues that they have with this variance. And I've dealt with this planning board with variances over the years, and I think as Adam pointed out in his initial comments, your typical variance is based upon the topography of the property. For example, I got a variance one year because there were wetland issues, so we need to relocate the driveway so we didn't impact the wetlands. Another issue I've had before the board is where we had a contractor came in, put the deck around a swimming pool based upon the improper survey. After the fact came in and said, this is a hardship. You don't want us to dig up the pool and relocate the entire pool. That's your typical situation where it's not created by the property owner itself. And I think what you've heard tonight, first off, as far as Mr. Millian, I'm glad to see this property is finally being redeveloped. I think, great, look forward to it, but I think that as Adam mentioned, there's an issue concerning the intensity of the use we'll get to as part of another appeal. But this property is not Sea Ray. This was not an active boat building operation like Sea Ray. Mark Traworgy, who's been a client of mine for many years, would do one custom yacht at a time. You had 4 or 5 employees. You didn't have the volume of traffic that we're going to be dealing with here. If you allow this variance, I think you're setting a dangerous precedent because you're taking a non-conforming use that's been abandoned for a significant period of time and saying because of what was there before, I can now build higher than what the current code allows. You'd be opening a floodgate for a lot of different variances to come in under those types of circumstances. The main issues that we have, if you look at the actual criteria, and I believe, and counsel can correct me if I'm wrong, that you have to meet all of the criteria. They can't just meet 3 out of the 5 or 4 out of the 5, but they've got to meet all of the criteria. So the first criteria, they certainly don't meet because it talks about the extraordinary and exceptional conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property because of its size, shape, topography, or other unique features. We haven't heard anything about how this property is unique, other than the fact they want to go up 58 feet instead of 40 feet, or they want to have a waterfront restaurant that's closer to the water than the 50-foot setback requirement. It's still waterfront even if it's 50 foot back. So I don't think you've heard any evidence that it's unique. The second criteria that we've heard about basically is that the not self-created by the applicant. Clearly, as Mr. Millian acknowledged, he needs to go 58 feet because he can make more money with it. There's been no justification for the setback on the restaurant requirement that would meet your variance criteria. Then we come to the last page, and it's kind of interesting because on the talk about the minimum variance that's necessary to alleviate the hardship. Well, here we've not heard anything. You can go to 40 feet, you just can't make as much money. Or he's going to have an uglier building if he can't get that 5th floor, but he's not willing to increase the floor space. If you look at the totality of this project, it's almost like a mini planned unit development. They're going to mix a restaurant, shops, and boat storage, 240 boats on a 4-acre piece of property. We'll be dealing with an appeal on some of these other issues concerning the determination of intensity. You've already heard there's issues with septic tanks, and we don't think that the septic tank on the current plan is going to be adequate. Parking's not going to be adequate when you've got 240 boats and an 80-seat restaurant on a holiday weekend. You've got 113 spaces. There's a host of issues with this project that we'll deal with separately, but I think as far as your consideration tonight, they don't meet the criteria for a variance. And my clients would address some of the other site-specific issues, but we don't think that there's been a proper showing. And again, the profit motive, the economic viability is not one of the criteria that you can consider. Thank you.
Sir.
To be called. Thank you. Working again?
I think we can get it pulled up for you.
There. Okay. My name is Dennis Clark. I live on A1A, about 1,200 feet from this property. May want to consider tabling this project until you hear our appeal on September 10th. Everything is wrong with this project. The entire premise for this application is based on a decision that its use is not more intense than the prior use. You know that intensity is commonly measured by the floor area ratio, and it has more than doubled from 12.8 to 30.5, and the parking will increase tenfold. The variances should not be considered until the site plan is properly reviewed. The site plan in your package was pretty much in there by accident as an attachment to some other documents. You have to look to the TRC list of issues. The health department, for instance, estimated, and this goes to the variances. You have to look at the use as it applies to the variances. The health department estimated 11,250 square feet is needed for the septic field, when only 5,000 square feet is shown. That's less than half of what's needed. The septic tanks and field are also in the buffer area, may not be set back far enough from the intercoastal. No stormwater calculations or underground stormwater system design are shown. What about the coquina in this area? Stormwater gutters should be shown. There's no secondary emergency access, as was requested by the fire department, and the traffic analysis is not done. Nor has the applicant supplied information on a deceleration lane and left turn lane, which would almost assuredly be required. Just to give you an idea of the layout, as the before, this would be something like it would look, except it's not really showing the restaurant and the other buildings. There would be another piece in the front, restaurant in the back, another building up front. So that's, it would be twice the width and 100 feet longer, this building. And that's the good-looking building.
Mr. Clark, I'd remind you that you have a 3-minute time limit, and I'd remind the public that all comments are limited to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Am I over yet?
I did not use the timer. I figured we'd
Okay, it's
give
only
you
going to
some
be
time.
less than a minute. This is what it looks like in the area. There's 25 residential homes there and one little hardware store besides this business. That's it. This is the fence from showing that home next door is about 12 feet off the property line of this building. And those are the calculations showing that the building is almost 3 times larger, and that the floor area ratio is 239% of the previous use. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I just wanted to say, please table this application until you've heard the appeal next month.
Hello, my name is Janet Sullivan. I live in the Hammock. The prior use of this building was for the construction of custom yachts, with a very small crew of employees working on one boat at a time, compared to the proposed project that will operate like a PUD with mix of uses, including restaurants, shops, dry storage, and the related boat repair activities. There is simply no basis to conclude that the prior entitlements from 2000-ish can now be applied to the new mixed-use project. Think about this scenario if you were a neighbor. You live near this development, as 25 of us do, one whose home is only 12 feet away. There used to be up to 12 employees working at Newcastle, and their cars stayed there all day. Now you have maybe 100 to 200 cars per day going in and out of this project on a road with a 50-mile-per-hour speed limit. You have the constant noise of a forklift all day long. The location is open from 7 a.m. until 10 p.m. or later, so maybe at the restaurant, music till 9 or 10 p.m. And FDOT is likely going to put a right turn lane in front of your property. The need for both variances are self-imposed by the applicant, as you all have already discussed, and are therefore, by definition, not a hardship. The restaurant is 15 feet closer to the ICW solely to allow for more parking places. That's because this development is way too intense to begin with. The variance should be denied. The new building, although 1 foot lower than the current building, will be twice as wide and 100 feet longer. And that's 3 times the area of the existing building. The front setback is close to that of the current tall building and will forever change the viewshed from the scenic byway. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you.
My name is Dr. Lynn Bravo Rosewater. I want to say that one of the things as a citizen that I'm bothered by with this project is that there's so much multiple use of what's going on. This didn't come and say, oh, we want to put a shopping center, and we're going to put 4 commercial buildings. We're going to have this huge storage thing. It just seems to me that this is not, oh, we had a boat building place, we're doing the same thing. It's totally different. And one of the other things that I'm concerned about is every time land is turned over, we say, okay, you had to keep 40% of the caliper. Well, now they kept 40. Now you only have to keep 40% of what they kept. And so I think we have to look at some of the problems that this kind of development is having for us. So I think that the other thing that hasn't been mentioned is everything's being torn down. So this should start as something new. This isn't an ongoing from what was there. This is something that's brand new. And it hasn't been considered that way. Just think if I bought a house, tore it all down, started from scratch and said, okay, I want all the variances you gave for the house that used to be here. I wouldn't be able to get that. I'd have to leave part of that structure standing. So I think that this is something that really has so many moving parts to it that make it much more intense. I don't know how this decision that this is less intense came about, because it seems much more intense. And I think the fact that you're coming closer to the intercoastal, and what don't want is to have more infiltration into the intercoastal water system that's not going to be good for it. And there's been nothing to look at to say how detrimental is this. And you're not going to know that. So I think that these requirements that are being asked for are right. It's so I can make more money. And I don't think that's what the job of reviewing people is to make sure you can make more money. You buy a property, you have to have some sense of what you want to do. But I think to make it happen so someone can make more profit from it isn't what this planning board is about. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Kathy V., and I live at 5676 North Ocean Shore Boulevard. I'm the property right next to the boat building place, and I am within a pretty close distance to it. I want to begin by saying that the current owner of the property has been really friendly and amenable in regard to the lease with Dr. Dredge, which is no longer on site. But what we found is that there's a lot of input being given to them, including mine and my neighbors and folks from A1A Scenic. And I think that sometimes when you have a lot of input like that and there's no formal process, you know, I'm saying, yeah, I'd like some tall bamboo, and they're saying, no, we don't want that. And I'm saying, I want a tall concrete wall, and other people are saying, no, this would be better. So the fact that we haven't had a formal planning process to participate in has been a problem. And as Mr. Millian stated, it's hard to do this without a picture. So I want to be sure that I tell you one thing. I worked in government for over 30 years, so I know exactly what you do and how you do it and in the time and effort that you put into it. I also want to be sure you understand that I am not opposed to growth. Growth is why I am here. I decided to move here and live here. But growth is a bad thing when it occurs haphazardly and when developments, buildings, or homes are not compatible with their neighbors. This development, as best I can tell, given the limited information, is not compatible. We purchased our property in 2015, and it was a fixer-upper. We removed over 100 tires and 17 large dumpsters of garbage. This included appliances, car parts, wire, chicken cages, broken windows down near the water, china, barbed wire, a shack by the water that was falling down, and any of you that boat may have driven by the property and seen it, a dock that was falling into the water, and many other things. About 80% of this work performed on site was done by myself and the other owners of the property. It's actually 2 parcels that we bought together. This wasn't subcontracted, so we have a lot of equity, a lot of sweat equity in it. Now we've constructed a house there, and we absolutely love it. Given the residential nature of this stretch, and I'm not going to repeat what others have said, it's primarily residential. I'm not sure how you can draw the conclusion that adding boat storage almost twice as large as the current facility, a restaurant with docks on the back piece of the property, and over 7,000 square feet of retail space. Basically, we'll have a strip mall facing our property as it's designed right now, plus 130 plus parking spaces. How can you say that's less intensive than what was previously there? There will be people coming and going at all times of the day and night, cars parking, doors opening and closing, car and boat engines starting, quite a bit of additional traffic, and security lights on all night. We'll also have a lot more boat traffic along a portion of the intercoastal waterway that is the narrowest. There are numerous issues and concerns with this development, and is much too intense for this neighborhood. I'd like to just conclude by saying I'm opposed to the variance because I think this process needs to be a lot more inclusive, and we need to be able to see exactly what's going to happen. I can tell you that I have the benefit of a 40-foot buffer that was written into the plan. That 40-foot buffer is great, but if you look, I would guess that this room is about 40 feet wide. Is anybody, you're in construction, is that about right? So, it sounds like a lot, it's not. So I urge you to not approve this variance, and thank you for your time and your service.
My name's Fran Bennett. I live in the Hammock. I just want to say, in looking at the site plan, I think we all are okay with a shop coming in or another dining option in the hammock, but this looks like 10 pounds of stuff going on to a 5-pound lot, so it just seems too intense for the area. In terms of the setback for the river, going from 50 to 35, I live on the river, and after a few storms and a few hurricanes, I think he'd rather be 50 feet back and not 35 feet back from the river, because it can come up pretty quickly. For the stormwater, I don't know how I don't understand the underground storage, but they're going to be down in the water table with the vaults, so I don't know how that works. But it just seems like they're trying to do too much on too small an area. And one other thing, when you put up the rendering of what this might look like, I got to say, I felt a little sick to my stomach. I mean, this is not Miami. To me, that looked, it did not look like the character of the hammock. It looked like something that belonged down in Miami and not here. So I hope that you don't approve. Thank you.
John Russell. I have the property to the south of where they're building this. And with the new building, my property as it is now, all I see is a white wall. You're getting ready to extend it another 100 feet, well, all the way down the side of my house, which I can live with. What I can't live with is the thought there's a 10,000-gallon gasoline storage tank less than 100 feet from my front porch. It's not on anything. It doesn't show where it's going to go. But I'm a little concerned about it, and I can see where y'all would be too if you woke up tomorrow morning and found one in your front yard. Thank you.
My name's Joy Ellis. I live in the hammock. I wanted to say that I think some dry boat storage and another restaurant in the hammock would be a wonderful addition. But it seems to me that 6 buildings is essentially a shopping center, which generally requires a 5-acre minimum. This should be treated as commercial planned unit development or expansion of a non-conforming use. Removing all buildings and starting from scratch should void all prior non-conforming variances. 35-foot side setbacks should now revert to 50 when next to residential uses. Commercial buildings, metal buildings are not allowed. Exterior walls must be constructed of finished materials. Tree preservation allocation was calculated as if it was an undeveloped lot. It is not an undeveloped lot. If you expect holiday usage to be 50% of the boats, the way it is desired to be, that's 120 boats. And it will use all the available parking without consideration of the restaurant. Septic field size is not adequate. It is located in the landscape buffer area and may be too close to the intercoastal waterway. I want to say that we in the hammock are for responsible development. We really encourage it and feel that dry boat storage is a good addition to our neighborhood, as is an intercoastal waterway restaurant. But these additional 4 businesses make this a shopping center, which is not appropriate on this 4-acre lot. Thank you so much.
My name is Jim Buckley. I own the property, and I'm trying to develop it for something that the community would really love and appreciate and want. So the whole intent here is to try to make it as attractive as possible, and to go to the intent of the hammock scenic A1A committee, and to actually what the intent is to make the roadway, the byway attractive. So the whole point here is between the two versions. The one version is pretty much, I think, I could be wrong, but I believe if I went with the larger version of everything, the more unattractive version, that's pretty much something I can automatically do or get done fairly well. The new version, the higher version, is basically the same height of the existing metal building. This was a boat building. There's been a lot of presentations here in the last 10 minutes that have been misrepresentations, and some of them wildly. I'm presuming just based on misinformation or just ignorance of what the situation really is, unfortunately. What we're trying to do here is push the building back, because I've already got a 60-foot building. It can stay there. I can rent this building out, unless you tell me otherwise. I could rent this building out to another boat manufacturer. There is an office building in front, or we used to be an old restaurant called Salt and Pepper many years ago. I grew up in this area, and it's got a metal huge 2-story storage building right attached to it. That's crammed right up by A1A. It's an eyesore to me. The existing building is an eyesore to me, but it can be left in place. I can certainly leave it there and rent it out to other people, and we can have it just the way it is. I'm presuming for the county that this would be a wonderful addition. It would be a nice restaurant on the river, and it would be boat storage, which, looking at Bing's on the weekends and on holidays, I think would be a much needed addition. There's a lot of gated communities, and people just need places to put their boats, and this would help. The flushing of the river, I'm an old surfer and sailor, and I've surfed up here since the 60s and been up here and fishing since the 60s. I grew up here. My dad was up here. With what we're intending to do, the flushing in the river would be better. We're going to remove a whole bunch of rocks by the river that have been out there, and we get better flushing action, so better water quality. So the whole idea here is that if we go up from 40 to 60, it's going to be way back from A1A, retaining the beauty of the byway, okay, making it economically feasible, and also giving us a good restaurant and everything else for everybody else. I've tried to do everything I can, as my neighbors have indicated, to be as good a neighbor as I possibly could and as good as I possibly can to all the neighbors here. So the whole intent here is to try to make it a very attractive facility. The idea of this being some kind of development, commercial strip mall, whatever, is crazy. All this is a building. We're trying to do the front, bring it down a little bit, and that would give it a better look. The bump outs were more or less to give it a better look. Can they be rented out to people? Sure. But honestly, on a per square foot basis, I would much rather have it be boat storage, because the numbers work. If it goes to 40 feet, I don't know that the numbers will work, but it'll be one very large building very close to A1A. So that's an alternative, or leaving everything as is with the metal building and everything crammed up to A1A in a 60-foot tall, 200-foot long building rented out to somebody else or to another boat manufacturer is the alternative. I strongly feel that this is something you should pass. It's in the best interest of the local people. I would more than happy to meet with anybody at any time and explain this and go over all the alternatives and everything else with them, and just try to be open. Kathy is my neighbor. John is my neighbor. They are very good neighbors, and I like them a lot. I've been engaging them, and I would engage anyone. I'd be happy to have meetings with them and do it. Thank you very much for your time.
Anyone else from the public wishing to comment? Would the applicant wish to make a rebuttal?
Just very briefly, because a lot of this is emotional. Under penalty of perjury, this is not a profit-making thing. I mean, we can make as much money with a 40-foot tall building, 57,000 square feet, as we can with a 58-foot tall building. We're not making more money by doing this. We have made an effort to make it a better product. So, some of the things were mentioned. Mr. Clark is well-intentioned. He showed a picture of an 82,000 square foot building and said, this is what we've got. And the reason I know that, it was a building I built. So he showed a picture of St. Augustine Shipyard, which is 82,000 square feet, imposed on the property, saying, hey, this is what you guys are getting. It isn't what you're getting. Okay? The misconception about the sewer system, well, 5,000 square feet is enough. It wasn't 5,000 square feet. It was 5,000 gallons a day. It's more than that. So when you put all of this together, this is a question on variance. Okay, I believe personally that the product is a much, much better product as we proposed it. But either way, it's not more profit if you approve it. It's just simply a better looking building.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wishing to make a comment? Seeing
My name is Jody Bollinger, and I live 2 lots down from the boat storage building. It all sounds wonderful. It looks great. I guess unless you're the one that has to live close to it, and you have concerns about the amount of traffic that might be going in and out, about the 10,000-gallon gasoline storage tank. It would be wonderful to have a nice boat storage area. It would be wonderful to have a nice restaurant in the area. But I guess my concern living close to it is the amount of noise it's going to produce, the amount of traffic, not only on A1A, but on the intercoastal itself. So those are my concerns.
anyone else from the public wishing to make a comment? Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public comment section and open it for the board. Board comments. Anyone from the board? Yes, sir, Mr. Langella.
Go ahead. Would like to make
Mr. Goodman?
I would like to make a motion. Is that, I can do that now?
Sure.
I'd like to make a motion to deny the variance.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, I want to make a couple of statements here if I could. This is, to me, first of all, Adam, just to answer one of the public questions out there. The gas storage tank, are there any regulations as to distances, and is that something that you will see in your site development plan?
I think it's something that's depicted on the graphic that's displayed in your packet and in front of everybody right now.
But I mean, as far as the requirements, will you be looking at
Yes.
that when it comes to that? And do you know what those distances are for?
I cannot quote anything, but there are requirements that are not only ours, but there are other regulatory agencies. And
Right.
those requirements
DOT
have to
or
be met.
whatever. Okay. Like I said earlier, I think that the applicant, to me, did a good job in showing that the existing situation, you can enhance what he wants to do. If we give him a variance, he doesn't have to build the same monstrosity. And we're not here to talk about the use, but in a C2 zoning, there's a lot of things that this gentleman could do on this property without going to us at all. So a lot of the comments about use, it wasn't even pertinent to what we're talking about tonight, which was the setbacks and the height. So, I mean, no matter what we say, a lot of the things that the neighborhood is complaining about, we're not dealing with tonight. So if the gentleman wants to have a lot of parking and a lot of square footage, he can still do that as long as he meets the requirements. This is, again, one of those things, sometimes be careful what you wish for, because there might be a big, large square building up there, and as long as it meets all the requirements. I don't see a way, unfortunately, for the applicant that I can get over number 2 above all the others. Even with the most creative thinking, I just really can't get over that. So I agree with the motion.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So I just want to clarify the larger building, the 40-foot building, if that would be allowed and meet setback requirements.
Well, we hadn't given a formal review to that. I think the quick look that I had today the answer to that would be correct. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
I just want to say that from a starting point, I like the concept. I like what you're trying to do. And it's certainly consistent with the uses that are provided for in C1 zoning. I echo, though, what Mr. Langelo says, we're not here to talk about use. We're here to talk about a variance. And as I understand the variance process, it's not a vehicle by which we modify the land development code to accommodate good development. It's a process whereby we allow an individual to avoid the strict scriptures of the land development code because of a hardship that they don't create themselves. And so I don't know how I can support a request for variance that is designed to create good development contrary to the strictures of our code. I think you're going to have to go to the legislature for that. You're going to have to change the code. And I'd support you in that effort, but I can't support you tonight.
Any other comments?
I think it's an excellent opportunity for redevelopment. Mixed use concept is great. It's just that I don't see the variance process as a remedy to where you want to get to go, and I'm not seeing all the hardship. I'm seeing the hardship as self-imposed, so I can't support the case tonight.
Once again, any other comments? We have a motion to deny the applicant.
Just, thank you.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman. Just to emphasize for the record, the grounds, I believe, on the basis, just want to confirm with the motion maker and the second, that the basis for the denial is that criteria 2, such conditions were not created by the affirmative actions of the applicant, and the applicant has acted at all times in good faith, is what it should read in our report. Is that the criteria, or is it also 1 with that? And I can read that into the record if I need to as well.
No, 2 would work.
Okay.
If I could, I'm not sure we even got into all the other issues. So I think sometimes when you take a step up the ladder, if you can't get past the first or second rung, you don't keep going. So maybe on the legal side of it, at a minimum, it was number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have a motion to deny the application, and we have a second. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
We have 1 opposed. Motion carries. Next item on our agenda is staff comments.
No comments for you this evening. Thank you very much.
Anyone have comments from staff? None? Board comments? Anyone from the public wishing to make a comment? Seeing none, we stand adjourned.